Hello and welcome to Sports Fan Entertainment. We talked about some potential offensive coordinators for Brian Callahan earlier in the week, and now let's look at some potential defensive coordinators to look out for. So I scoured his coaching tree, everyone that he's worked with in the NFL, found some potential names, and there's also some names, or at least one on here, that he hasn't worked with, but we already know that he is interviewing with, so we want to go ahead and take note of that. By the way, they didn't really elaborate on this, but they said that Carthon is actually the one that's in charge of the coaching staff. I don't know to what extent that means, because you would think that it's Callahan that would, ultimately, seek out the guys that he's interested in, and that they would be at the very least collaborative on that. But then Carthon gets the final say on Brian Callahan and his job status, and then Callahan will be able to decide his coordinators in the lower tier. That's what I would think, or maybe Carthon's just going to hire offensive defensive coordinators, which I don't love if that's the case. I'm hoping, if that is the case, that he works with Callahan to get the guys that he wants, though, because obviously you want to have some congruence in terms of, okay, I want guys that are running my system and what I want to run, and that they're completely in tune on that if that's the case. But this is the list that I've come out with. So let's go ahead and go down the list. And we begin with who we've already interviewed with, and this is Denard Wilson. Denard Wilson, who is currently the defensive backs coach for the Baltimore Ravens this year, and then last 2 years, he was defensive backs coach for the Eagles. In 2022 specifically, he was also their pass game coordinator. And then from 2017 through 2020, he was a defensive backs coach for the Jets. And then he also did a defensive backs coach stint for the Rams in 2015 and 16. So he has a defensive backs background for sure. It hasn't been a coordinator yet. But with the Ravens, the secondary, how well they've been playing this year, despite an injury to Marlon Humphrey that's kind of been hampering him all season long. Very impressed there. The turnovers that they've been able to have all season have been very impressive. I mean, the overall Ravens defense has been something to watch for sure. So you're impressed by that. And even though they definitely disappointed in the Super Bowl, I mean, the Eagles secondary last year was actually pretty good. It was this year that they really took the step back and really struggled when they lost some talent and some guys got older. So I think, and also in 2021, I like the Eagles defense, because that was before Jalen Hurts really came into his own, and the defense was a big part as to why they were still able to be a winning team that year. So very impressed by this guy. Now, is he a great play caller? Will he be a great play caller? Does he have a great scheme? I don't know. All I can tell you is recently he's been doing very well as the defensive backs coach, so I understand the interest in him, and we'll see and monitor him going forward, considering that is the only name as of right now that we know who we are interviewing. We move on, though, to Don Wink Martindale. Yes, so Don Wink Martindale and Brian Callahan have crossed paths in Denver. This was like over a decade ago now, so but still, I mean, you're not going to forget the relationship that you had. It was only a year, too, by the way. This was, I want to say, Callahan's first or second year in Denver is 2010, where Wink Martindale was a defensive coordinator there for the Broncos. So they've crossed paths. He's a guy that is on the market again. Now, the thing with Don Wink Martindale is you have to look specifically at the last two stops and why did they fail. Okay, so with the Giants, obviously there were some issues that he had with Brian Daboll late into the season, some drama, and ultimately that's why he was let go there. They had, just some things going on, and that's what happened. With the Ravens, they had some good years, but later into his stint, not so great, and they ultimately let him go. And the knock against Wink Martindale is after he left, they hired Mike McDonald, and they've gone to the next level. Now they're if not the best, one of the best defenses in the NFL, and might be a Super Bowl winning defense when it's all said and done. So it's not a great look that after you've left this team, they've now elevated defensively and might win a Super Bowl because of it. Not a great look. Also, same goes for them letting go Greg Roman and getting Todd Monken as offensive coordinator. So, look, he's experienced. Again, he was former defensive coordinator for the Broncos for a year, Ravens for 4 years, and Giants the last two. And then the Giants 2022 defense was really good. 23, at times it was really bad. At times it was really good. So, it was up and down for sure. So, he's experienced. He's 60. If he got a job here, he wouldn't leave until he retires, probably, if he does well. So you like that. But there's some risk there because also you wonder about the personality, considering the fact he had some struggles with Brian Daboll. So some questions there, but they do have at least 1 year history. We move on to Chris, and I want to say I'm pronouncing this correctly, Korcharek. So this is the defensive line coach for the San Francisco 49ers, and this guy also has running in with Brian Callahan. He was the former defensive line coach for the Detroit Lions whenever Brian Callahan was with the Detroit Lions. That was in 2016 and 2017. And he was the Lions defensive line coach 2010 through 2017, Miami Dolphins defensive coach of 2018, and then has been the 49ers defensive line coach since 2019. So the last 5 years has been the defensive line coach for the 49ers. So it begs the question, because this is a very successful defensive line, why is this guy not getting many more looks? I heard some rumblings about him potentially maybe being elevated to being the defensive coordinator last year when they lost, I think, or maybe even the year before that, when they lost Robert Saleh, maybe, or maybe it was the year after, right before they got Steve Wilkes elevated. And it ultimately wasn't him, but I heard some rumblings about that. And you wonder, I mean, this guy's doing such a good job with the defensive line. Does he have defensive coordinating aspirations? I don't have anything decisive on that, but just looking through guys that he's worked with and Brian Callahan and seeing the success of this guy, I think this is a guy to look out for. I'm not saying that there's anything definitive on this, not saying that I have any inside information on this, but, considering the fact that the 49ers did consider elevating him to the defensive coordinator position, he might have the aspirations for that. We'll see. He also has stated that he likes being a defensive line coach, but it's just a name to look out for. We move on to the next name, and we have Steve Jackson. Now, this is a throwback even for me, okay, because I was born in 1996, right, and I didn't start watching the Titans until it was 99, but guys, I was like 2 or 3 years old. I don't really remember it. So Steve Jackson is a former Oiler/Titan from 1991 through 1999, and now finds himself as the Falcons Falcons defensive backs coach. Falcons running back. There used to be a Falcons running back named Steve Jackson. Now finds himself as the Falcons defensive backs coach, and a guy that's actually been having quite the success in the NFL lately. And you might even remember this. He was our defensive backs coach for a year, or 2 years actually. In 2016 and 2017, he was our assistant defensive backs coach. And he worked a little bit with Kevin Byard. Now, Byard's no longer here, but you can attribute maybe some of Byard, I don't know how much because he was the assistant, but maybe some of Byard's progression into the league to Steve Jackson and the work he was able to do. So, hey, he used to be in Tennessee for 3 years, when we moved from Houston to Tennessee. So, former Tennessee Titan/Oiler, former coach here. And I liked the Falcons secondary this year. I hated their offense, specifically their passing game, but their secondary is pretty good. He's, a large part as to why Jeffrey Okudah has resurrected his NFL career, but it seemed as if he was going to be a bust. And he was also coaching with Brian Callahan. And he was the cornerbacks coach, secondary coach for the Bengals in 2020 and 2021. So there's a lot here. Again, does he play? Does he want to call plays? Can he call plays? I'm not sure about all that, but I saw the connection that I thought it was very interesting. So that was the name I wanted to mention. And then we also have here Tony Oden. So Tony Oden. So this is currently the defensive backs coach for the New York Jets. And that's a very impressive thing right there. So he's their cornerback coach / defensive assistant. And then he was the secondary / quarterbacks coach for the 49ers in 2020. And he crossed paths with Brian Callahan in 2016 and 17. He was the Lions quarterbacks coach from 2014 through 2017. But again, he's a senior defensive assistant for the Jets now, a guy that's very well-versed at this point. He's 50 years old. He's been around the game. Seems like a guy that would want to elevate to that defensive coordinator position. This is definitely a name that I would certainly look out for as well. I listed some other names as well. I listed an Alan Williams, who was the former defensive coordinator for the Bears. He also worked with Callahan for a little bit. My only thing with him is he stopped being the defensive coordinator for the Bears. He stopped in 2022 as his last year because he was having some health issues. So I assume that those issues are probably still going on. So I don't know if I pick or if I expect him to get back into coaching. And then also Durante Jones is another guy that Callahan has worked with as a name to look out for. There's also certain retreads that are out there. So you have Joe Barry, the former defensive coordinator for the Green Bay Packers now. Stay away. I mean, just stay away. At times, the Packers defense this year was actually quite impressive. But over the last number of seasons, I've just seen too many red flags. I think that's why they finally now decided to move off of him. There was Vic Fangio out there for a little bit. I'd stay away. We're going to let another team do the whole Mike Vrabel thing. Obviously, he's not coming back here. We're going to let another team do that. And there's also, just some other names out there as well. But these are the guys I was able to identify and saying, okay, there's history here. It makes sense. These guys, either some of them, or at least in Wink Martindale's case, is a former defense coordinator, or other guys that you would see, and it would seem that they would want to elevate to now being, a higher status in that position. I will also say this, though. It depends on his loyalty. Shane Bowen. Because, what is the approval rating on Shane Bowen at this point? If we can get someone better, definitively, I think we'd all be down. But I don't think anyone is really blaming Shane Bowen for the last 2 years. There's been certain performances where, it was disappointing. Like when the Colts ran all over us this year. Very disappointing for sure. And there's some other performances as well. If he likes Shane Bowen, would he keep Shane Bowen? It's possible. We'll see. I could see it. And I don't think people would hate it. If I had to guess, they would put a rating on that. I'm not live right now, but let's say I put out a poll. I would say if I said approve or disapprove, I feel like it'd be a 40% approve. Most people probably disapprove. But it wouldn't be, it's like Biden's, it's probably better than Joe Biden's approval rating, where most people would prefer something else. But if it is what it is. Biden's probably lower. We'll see. I don't think Bowen's going to come back. But also, I don't think right now, unless the Vrabel coaching for the Seahawks, I don't think Vrabel's coaching either. So I don't know what Shane Bowen's going to do. So he might be jobless. We'll see if he sticks around. I don't think there's anyone else on this Titans staff that I could see being elevated to that position. Charles Harris is kind of an interesting name. But considering how this year went, is there really justification for that? I don't necessarily see that, and I don't think that they're going to see that either. So I wouldn't hold your breath when it comes to like a Charles Harris being elevated to that position. So we're going to see on this. It's going to be very interesting, and it is a very important hire. That we absolutely cannot deny as, you're talking about Brian Callahan being an offensive guy, right? And we know he's going to be the play caller. So whoever he hires as a defensive coordinator is basically going to be in charge of that side of the football. And that's a big deal, okay? And we've seen before. Now, we haven't seen it because we don't hire damn offensive coordinators as head coaches, except for Ken Wisenhunt. We've seen with other teams, you can have this great offense, but you have a guy on the defensive side that doesn't know what he's doing. Your defense is going to stink, and there's not really going to be anything that you can do to fix it, depending on the roster, of course, as well. But it's a big hire, and we're going to see who he gets because it is a big deal. It's a whole side of football. I know everyone wants to ignore defense nowadays, but it is a big part of football, and we're going to see what happens there. Also, a retread I forgot to mention, Ron Rivera. I don't know if he's going to want to be down to be a defensive coordinator again. With how the Commanders' defense has looked, though, particularly this year, I probably would stay away from that too. So I wouldn't be too down for one of the retreads that I'm seeing lately, but we'll see. Belichick's not going to do it. I know some people are mentioning Belichick doing it, but I absolutely cannot see that. So there you go. Those are my thoughts on potential defensive coordinators for the Tennessee Titans. What are your thoughts? Comment down below. I want to know. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to like, comment, and most importantly, to subscribe. Until next time, this has been MJ of Sports Fan Entertainment, and I'm out. See you all later.